Good afternoon, everyone. This is the PCE Working Group meeting. We're right after lunch, so some people may join us in a minute or two, but I'm going to go ahead and get started because we want to stay on track. So my name's John. I'm one of the co-chairs. We have a co-chair. Julian could not make it this time. He's been unable to travel at the last minute, so it's a shame, but maybe he'll be joining us on the Meet Echo. In fact, I see his name down there. So Julian is with us, but not in body. I just want to first of all start with the agenda bashing. We posted the agenda a couple of weeks ago. Here it is. Please look it over. You'll have me telling you about working group status first. Then we discuss some input from other working groups. After that, we'll talk some about our working group drafts, and then a couple of new drafts coming into the working group from Stefan and Xiangquang. Finally, we'll cover some drafts that have been presented before, get an update from the authors, any progress that's been made, and at the end we'll close with an update on the SDN discussion that we started on the mailing list last year. So does anyone want to bash the agenda? Not hearing any problems with it, so I'll proceed to my status slides. Okay, before we get started, we're displaying the note well. Please familiarize yourself with the note well if you haven't done so already. I won't read out every word of this, but the gist of it is that by participating in this meeting, you are making contributions to the IETF proceedings, and basically the note well tells you about your rights and responsibilities in terms of intellectual property that that may be discussed during the meeting. In terms of administrivia, please sign the blue sheets. I will hand out the blue sheets after I finish talking here, just to make sure that everyone has arrived. Please sign them and pass them on. We have a minute taker, Drew. Is anybody here on Jabber? Young? Okay, thanks. If you could keep an eye on Jabber and bring any comments to the mic for me, thank you. We'll be streaming the session through audio and video, and we do have several people here participating on Meet Echo who are not in the room, so it would be really good if you could please speak only using the microphones. State your name before you speak so that the people know who it is that's speaking. And if presenting, if you could try to remain inside this little pink box down here on the floor so that the cameras can pick you up and people watching remotely can see you, that would be good. As I say, Julian sends his apologies, but he's right there on Meet Echo, so he'll be chipping in if he needs to. Usual reminder about the mailing list. We conduct all our business on the mailing list, and would like to encourage you all to use it. If you have anything you want to discuss about drafts, their mailing list emails are better than private emails for that, so that we can see what's being discussed and what's being agreed. If there's any issues on the drafts, then please put them on the list. Any conclusions that you come to, then please put that on the list as well. Please use the list. If you have a new draft, then the best way to introduce that to the working group is by sending an email to the list saying, I have a new draft, here's a problem it solves. Because a short email to that effect will actually give you a lot of exposure to people who would like to read it. And of course, we judge all our working group consensus on comments that are made to the list. Information in this meeting is good and useful for the chairs, but final conclusions are always drawn on the list. So that's where we want you to put your information. Okay, so we've been through the agenda. No one had any problems. Quickly talk about the status of the working group internet drafts. So first things first, we published 4 new RFCs since the last meeting in Singapore. We have the extensions for PCE-initiated LSP setup. That's been a long time in the pipeline, and we're very pleased to see that published. Complete some of the work on stateful PCE that's been long overdue. We have extensions for interlayer TE, 8282. We have extensions for point and multi-points, which is a BIS on RFC 6006. Correct some issues in that RFC. And then finally, importantly, we have a new RFC on experimental code points and PCEP. So now there is an official space in the code points for you to use for experiments. We have one internet draft currently with the IESG in IETF last call. That's for the LSP setup type generalization. That's actually, I think, completed IETF last call now. There were a couple of comments during last call from the ADs, which will be addressed in that draft, but that's fairly straightforward, and it will be progressing to the RFC editor soon. Draft still in the working group then. So let's see if we have people in the room that can help update the status on these. I think I know the status for most of it. The first one is applicability for inter-area and inter-AS, where I shared a Shepherd review a while ago. That seems to have gone fairly quiet. Any authors in the room want to tell us where that stands?
Hi, this is Dhruv. Though Dan King has been taking care, I'm a co-author. I'll check with him, and we had the discussion that whether we should talk about stateful PCE now or not. I think that still is a bottleneck. Like the authors are not able to conclude that should we just publish this as it is, or open the discussion and add stateful part as well. So that's the main reason this is kind of stuck.
So this is kind of an old draft as drafts go, and it predates all the stateful PCE work. And I guess there's a concern that it may be a little obsolete if we don't include stateful PCE. It's almost like we'd be publishing something as historical. So I would encourage the authors to think carefully about adding stateful PCE to that.
I personally completely agree with you.
Okay. So we have the 2 GMPLS drafts where it's essentially blocked on the final Shepherd review. I know Julien had some comments which he's been trying to share with the authors for some time on the GMPLS PCEP extensions. I think he's close to doing that. I haven't had an exact update from him, but once he does that, then we unblock that, and we also unblock the WSON RWA draft, which is sitting in a queue waiting to go to the IESG. We have 2 drafts which recently went through working group last call. There was a segment routing draft where we had some nice comments from Adrian. Thank you, Adrian, and also from Dhruv, I think, which I have in my queue to address. My apologies for being a little slow in getting to those. It's sure just because of not having enough time to process them, but I will get to them soon, I promise. And then we've just passed the working group last call for the PC Association group. Dhruv, I'm sure you're going to talk about that one later, aren't you? Yeah. So in the queue for last call next, we have the PCE hierarchy extensions, which has just been renewed. So now that is now a live draft again. I think we can proceed to last call there. We also have stateful PCE auto bandwidth in the queue, which is just sitting ready for last call. So we'll get that last call after the meeting. Various things not on the agenda. This time we have 2 new working group items: LSP control request draft and the newly adopted PCEP flow spec, which was just posted a few days ago. We won't be talking about the Yang draft this time. Is there any news or change on that?
Hi, this is Dhruv. Regarding the Yang draft, we made an update. The main update was only to add some examples and clarify how the Yang model would be used. So we added some JSON examples in the appendix. Apart from that, I think the document is quite stable, and we would think that it's time for getting the Yang doctor's review. So
Okay.
that's something that maybe we could request now.
I think that's fine to request, yeah. So recently we have revived the PCE Enhanced Errors draft, I think for the second time of reviving. Hamian, you want to tell us how that's progressing?
Hamian from Huawei. This is actually a quite old draft that has been silent for a couple of years. I tracked the slides 8 years ago and tried to understand what is the original motivation from the authors. And I update the draft by adding those kind of new error types that has been developed after the previous version of the draft, and keep the reference updated. Currently, I would like to share with the working group to see whether we are going to the right direction, and I think we can close after we get confirmed from the working group.
Okay, thanks. Any authors from remote initiated GMPLS LSP can give us a status? I guess not. Staple PC LSP scheduling draft, author for that?
True again. So we made an update just before this IETF, mostly editorial and trying to align to the published RFC in the TEAS working group. More or less, I think we need a little bit more reviews. We have not seen reviews for this document, so that's something that we would, at this moment, ask the working group to have a look and provide some more reviews for this document.
Thank you. And then finally, not on the agenda, but we have recently been talking to the authors of the PCE, staple PCE point-to-multipoint draft. The authors indicate that's ready for last call. The chairs note that, so we'll place it on the queue for the last call. The authors have also requested early allocation of code points for their draft because implementations of that will be shipping. So the chairs are going to take action on that. Please email the list if you have any objection. Otherwise, we'll just go ahead and do that. A couple of documents are expired. We talked about inter-area AS applicability already, and we talked about the GMPLS PCEP extension simply expired because it's ready to go, but we're waiting for Shepherd comments. So don't be concerned that these are expired. It's kind of expected, but we are hoping that they'll be revived soon. So that's a working group status. Any questions for me on any of that?
Hi, this is true. During this IETF, I was having some discussion, and one point that came up was regarding the segment routing draft. So we have our PCEP segment routing. We are, as you know, that we are ready to ship to ISG, but we also have BGP TE policy, and nowhere the TE policy works in its space, and we also have the PCEP extensions there. But when we talk to the customers, there is this confusion that how does these things work together, and there is no space where we have actually discussed that ever. So just wanted to put this out that this is something that we should within the IETF or within the routing area have a little bit clarity on when T policy in BGP, what role that plays, and when the PCEP extension for creating SRERO is used. That's never been discussed actually, so that's what I wanted to bring it out in the working group.
Yeah, could you give me a reference to the BGP work? But yeah, that would be helpful. Thank you. Okay. Is Stuart here? All right, Stuart, I think you're first on the agenda.
I'll just do it from here rather than getting mic'd up.
Yeah, that's fine, Stuart. You only have one slide.
There's only one slide, yes.
Yeah.
Is it going to come up there? Good, great. Yeah. Thank you. Stuart Bryant, one of the PALS chairs. So this is a heads up to a number of groups. LDP uses TCP MD5 for authentication, and RFC 5928 says this is not a good idea. And we've had some pushback on minor extension drafts to LDP from the security ADs that's caused us to look at this. So what we're doing is we're looking at TCP/AO as one option, or another option to be decided as a mechanism to replace MD5 for message authentication. The protocols that we'd like to coordinate with are BGP, MSDP, and PCEP, and the working groups that we think are in the same sort of space in terms of needing to do something new in security are IDR, PIM, PCE, BES, RTGWG, PALS, and MPLS. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask for guidance from the security area, so I'm going to SARG later in the week to explain the problem we've got and ask for them to help, because I think security area has to be very much part of the solution. We're going to have a discussion from the routing perspective in the MPLS working group on Thursday morning, and we are more than we would more than welcome hallway discussions or other discussions to understand whether this is a real problem that we need to solve, in which case we need to persuade the security area that it is not a problem that needs solving, or to come up with a solution that is credible for those of us who do routing to implement and deploy. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Stuart. So, yeah, anyone who has an interest in security and/or experience with securing PCEP, please, if you have time, make time to go to the MPLS meeting and carry on that discussion. So, Turles is next.
Who was at TEAS yesterday? Just wondering, not everybody. Okay, due to time, let me just try to quickly, skip over the background. Can you go forward if you, oh, it's me.
It's going, it's coming.
Yeah. So basically this was, without, telling traditional multicast and BIER, this is basically the way that BIER-TE works. In BIER-TE, you're sending packets which have bits. Every bit is pretty much an address of 1 to 256 indicating an adjacency. So basically, when you want to send a multicast packet from here to these two receivers, the red one, you basically have to set bits number 2, which is this interface, bit number 3, this interface, bit 4 and 5. And basically, every node looks at the bits that are local adjacencies, which in this case, this node only looks at 2, this node only at 3, this at 4 and 5, and voila, you'll basically get the packet routed on your explicit path through the network and replicated in the points where, a node has more than one outgoing interface with a bit set. So that's what we're talking about here. So then basically, the way on how in the forwarding plane a sender can indicate that it wants to send a packet to a particular set of destinations without having to bother about the path it takes would be that we do provide the source on the left-hand side of the picture with an information about which set of bits to set for every receiver. And, if he wants to add and remove receivers, he can basically just OR the appropriate bit sets for each receiver, right? Because that's just a superset and that's what forms the tree, right? So that's basically, I think, very crucial because this type of operation, providing a source, a sender of BIER-TE traffic with the list of, set of bits for every possible receiver. That's one of the core kind of functionalities that within the framework of the solution, we would probably think would be a core feature for PCE. So here's the framework that is in the TEAS document. So basically, we have here what we call the sender BFIR, BIER forwarding ingress router, midpoint BIER forwarding router, BIER forwarding egress router. And so underneath it, we have the BIER forwarding. We're also thinking about IGP extensions for it. And we have underlying, for example, when we tunnel through unicast, we have segment routing potentially underneath it and the normal IGP. And then toward the control plane, we're talking about having PCE controller, maybe a separate provisioning system or integrated into the PCE controller, monitoring. And we're basically talking about what are the different type of protocols of interest. One, obviously, primarily for provisioning is Yang through netconf, restconf. The other, of course, the PCP, which could be used for the provisioning. I think Dhruv told me that's called PCE-CC. Yep, okay. And then the other, just for the dynamic action when a sender says, okay, I want to have the following amount of traffic to the following set of receivers. For example, it would get exactly what I said to the last slide, a set of bit sets back for every receiver, and he could even individually add and remove the receivers within those bandwidth constraints and path he got back. So that's kind of high level the outline. We want to be in the architecture so flexible that different deployments can choose how much they want to rely on a controller versus the IGP to do things, right? So the opposite of having a controller do this could be done through the IGP, having the sender know the path. But I think the solution to do bandwidth management in that case is something we haven't done, I think, in the IETF at all right now. Well, of course, we have the good old CSPF on the ingress LSRs, but we all know what the problems of coordination are in that one. So that's why I think that especially for the dynamic allocation of the bandwidth, the PCE controller is going to be the most likely preferred first stage for that. Now, I haven't gotten a lot more slides about the this type of traffic stuff, right? In terms of what are the requests you would send in terms of, okay, here is the type of receivers I want, here are the QoS things I want to have, and here is basically the bit strings that you get back for the different receivers. That's really something to be worked out from this part. But I would like to maybe walk you a little bit through the topology model, which would be used for the configuration of the network, because that's the first thing I'd worked out, because that's something that we most likely need to rely on for anything we're doing within the controller, kind of to calculate path. And that's also something that would go into the IGP, would be used by the PCE-CC for provisioning, or in the Yang model for provisioning. So let me also skip here the BIER equivalent. So this is basically the overview of how I feel the topology would be good to be handled, right? So in the first place, the topology is every individual node in the network has a basically topology definition that really defines the local adjacencies, right? For every bit that is adjacent to this node, it defines, okay, here's the next hop. Here's where you send it to. That could be a layer 2 next hop, or it could be a tunnel. And then basically we have one of such tables for every 256 bits, right? Because a single packet can have a bit string of up to 256 bit, so you have multiple of these tables. The superset of all these forms the overall BIER-TE network topology, because you can now build yourself in the PCE controller representation of the topology, know how it maps to the underlying network topology, right? Either it's exactly the physical hops, or it's some tunnel through the underlying topology, and therefore do calculations in the PCE controller about the bandwidth available that you have on the virtual topology by deriving it from the underlying topology that you're doing it across. So the forwarding table is really stripping just all the possible metadata that you want to add to the topology to create additional functions. For example, consistency checks and the ability to automatically turn off bits in the topology. Don't use them for forwarding because you recognize they're inconsistent, or even in the non-PCE-CC case, automatically configuring some consistence, some adjacencies, right? But in the end, the forwarding table is exactly the same, except for not having metadata. And here, this is basically if the ingress router, of course, has the full network topology, it could do the same thing as the PCE controller calculating path. But of course, it doesn't have typically the awareness of the bandwidth in the network. So the other part was really saying that we have two instances of the topology. One is what is configured, or what, let's say, the PCE-CC determines. And then when you bring it down into the network, each network device may figure out, oh, okay, there is inconsistency here, and there is a subset then of what is being configured that is going to be actually operational, right? So that's basically the two instances that you want to look into. And obviously for path calculations, you want to use the operational topology. So that's basically for us also a question, what is the local decision making in a network device from what's being configured over to what's operational? Or do we also want to stage, in the PCE-CC case, the operational topology, make the decision of that on the PCE controller itself, so that, well, the network device becomes a full slave of the PCE-CC and basically doesn't do any local decisions, right? But very clearly, the path calculation must be from what we call the operational topology. That's actually what the bits are being forwarded in. Right, so and here is kind of the kind of abstract way to define this. That needs to be converted into one of the definition languages we have. I forgot, Dhruv was telling me one of these things that we use that's different from Yang, but basically this is just very high level abstract, right? So layer 2 bit, then a tunnel bit. On the receiver side, there is a bit to basically say, here, this is for your receiver, this is for traffic in the following BRF. And then here, and I don't want to go here into too much detail, but that's really the core of defining the topology into the different bits that you have, and then maybe attributing them with metadata to provide the logic, kind of a little bit intent information, so that different systems, like a monitoring system, a graphical display system, they can, from the topology, learn how to represent it, how to auto-configure. So there are a bunch of, and that's in the TEAS document, that's a bunch of, I think, very helpful logical metadata associated with the actual adjacencies. Right, so this was the example of how to reduce the amount of bits by, for example, having here a bunch of nodes in the network, and you really don't care about replicating in this area. You're just interested to select in your path some path that goes from here to explicitly one of these 5 nodes, and then from there on into exactly one of these 3 nodes. And so the midpoints are just unicasted through with tunnels. So that was basically the way on how we're getting, I think, very likely to overlay topologies when we're talking about BIER-TE. So that BIER-TE really is a bunch of replication points you're interested to have bits for, so you can replicate through them, and the rest is a bunch of, you know, segment routing paths through the network, hop by hop. Right, so that's basically, I think, already where I was going to. So, and I think this was obviously coming from questions to TEAS. So the request-reply model would really be what I was mentioning with the bit string set. You have on the ingress router the need for a particular traffic to have certain amount of QS guarantees. You obviously would want to send the typical PCE request for these resources now with a set of receivers. I'm not even sure if we have, for example, the model for, let's say, RSVP-TE point-to-multipoint. If it goes through a PCE-CC for point-to-multipoint, I think that same request could be used. Just the return data model would not be an ERO, but just for every receiver, a set of bits, right? So it could be as easy as adopting and extending that core, you know, maybe possible first thing to do with the PCEC. Right, and that was what I was saying, right? Local decision on controller, very easy, fits into the existing model. Local decision on BFIR, well, yeah, everything can be done. If anybody is interested, please jump up. I think this is definitely the wrong working group for that option. Right, so would love to see that we can start discussing this, right? So as far as BIER is concerned, we do have BIER-TE as a working group document, but now in February, the working group was recharted. In before, it was kind of experimental, and the working group could do everything by itself, including extensions to IGP and everything. And now, being a standards track working group, we're asked to basically have all the components of a solution be done in the right working groups, which basically mean TEAS for the traffic engineering architecture, ISR for IGP extension, and obviously any of at least the dynamic signaling, even if not the topology things in Yang, through the PCE working group, right? So, and I'm looking for guidance and help, and so would be very interested to get feedback and, you know, interested parties to join the effort to defining these things, for example, on, you know, extending existing PCE protocol signaling to support BIER-TE. Yep, that I think was it. How much time? Any comments?
Any comments for Tolis? You were well ahead of time, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, thank you for bringing this to our attention. I think that it does look like there is some good overlap, both in terms of the area of technology and also some of the specific things that we have developed for multicast already in PCE. I think it definitely would be interesting for us, and particularly the people who've worked on multicast in here before now, to take a closer look at the BIER-TE architecture. We should follow the progress in T's as well, but it looks like some good synergy with technologies we already have. So yeah, I think that was very worthwhile presentation, and thanks for the input.
Who has read the draft, if I may ask?
I have.
Okay. Very few. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So please reach out back to me if you have any questions or so, right? Because I mean, it's also the first time I've written something kind of addressing the traffic engineering community. So I'm pretty sure that can be well improved on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Young Lee is next to talk about stateful PCE for GMPLS networks. Yeah, here's the clicker. Oh.
Hello, this is Young Lee. I'd like to give you some update on stateful PCE for GMPLS. Basically, we made some large changes from the previous versions. This work has been dead for a while, but we feel we need to move as a stateful PCE for a generic one now become RFC. So basically, section 2, we had some context, explain this draft relationship with other drafts. And we added one major B bit for be able to indicate a bidirectional co-routed LSP in SRP object. I think this was triggered by Adrian to suggest based on some conversation in the PC list. And then we added modification for route exclusion, replace PLSP ID to symbolic path name to be more general. Two dependencies. Basically, this document is built on RFC 8231 and PSEP for GMPLS. So I think PSEP for GMPLS really need to move after Shepherding's comment. And in stable PCE, we have a two LSP operation. One is active stable PCE. The other one is passive stable PCE. For the active one, you see, PCE update message is sent from PCE to PCC to update LSP. And the passive one, we use a PC reply request message to convey path computation instruction. So basically, we just explain larger context what message would be impacted by the encoding that we are using from PSEP, GMPLS, and so on. So this is just a major, not major, but small change to be able to express bidirectional co-routed LSP by adding one bit in the flag in SLB objects. So I think, we want to really close on this draft as well, but we still have dependency, as I said before, stateless GMPLS extension. Once PSEP for stateless GMPLS is updated, we believe that the draft will be stable. There are some minor editorial and some issues that we need to deal with, but we'd like to push toward the working group last call.
Thanks, Young. As we get ready to do the working group last call on this draft, it would be really good to see some reviews on the list if people haven't read it yet, and I encourage you to go read this draft if you have an interest in GMPLS and let us have any comments, because if we need to make changes, now is the time to do that, and then hopefully we'll be last calling this as soon as we can. Okay, thanks.
Hi, I'm Dhruv. I'll be presenting updates on various PCEP association routes, and we have a bunch of them. This is basically some of the key ones that we have listed. What you see in the middle is our base association group draft, which has passed our working group last call. We got some comments from Adrian and Cyril. Thank you for that. So we have made an update based on that as well, and we hope the document will see some progress. I will discuss those updates as well, so that the working group is aware of those changes as well. We have two working group drafts, the diversity draft and the policy draft. I will give a quick update on that. And then we have a bunch of still drafts which are not yet adopted. We discussed in the last meeting the protection draft. At that time, we did an informal poll of the working group as well. And I think there is interest. So we hope to see this work getting adopted. Apart from that, we have VN association, we have a bidirectional, which Rakesh presented in the last meeting, and we also have the resource sharing with Hymion has been taken care of. And apart from this as well, there are a bunch of other association documents. So this topic is quite important for the working group, because there are a bunch of documents coming in this area. So let's start with the base document. So we got, again, thank you for the comments that we got. What are the changes that we did? We tried to clarify the role of, what's the role of association source? How do we make sure that when an association group is really unique? And just to add more clarity, we created terms like what is an association parameter and what is an association information. This is not a technical change, just the editorial change to really clean up the document and try to make sure that the readers are aware of what we are talking about. So association parameters are the key information: association ID, association source, association type, etc. And then association information is the extra TLVs that we carry, which is dependent on each of the different association types that are created in some other documents. So by using this terminology, we have tried to clean up the document a little bit. Also, what we did was, based on the comments, we clarified the relationship to the RSVP association object, and also when the SPEC is used versus when association is useful. And as it's pretty clear that there is a difference, but it's better to document that as it was suggested. We also allowed the association object in a reply message, so that if there is a no path possible, if no path is found, the PCE can indicate that it's because of this association, and along with the no path object can carry the association object as well to clearly state that that's the reason for path failure. Some error handling also got clarified, and we also added an example how the operator configured association range will be set, just to give a very clear idea of how to use this value. So this is a quick update on the base draft, and we hope to see this document go to the next step, which will be maybe the Shepherd review. Now let's talk about the working group documents, and we made updates to both of them before this IETF. The main changes were, earlier we used to have one TLV. We made two TLVs, one disjoint configuration, which is what is being requested, and a disjointness status, which says what the PCE actually sets up. So this gives a very clear information. The format of the TLVs is exactly the same. It's only two TLV types to clearly say when the bits represent configuration and when the bits represent the actual status. We also added the disjoint objective functions. Earlier in the document, we were referring this from another document, but that another document, some of the content we have now merged into this document itself, so that it can go. This is the main reason to add those objective functions. So it's better it's carried within the association diversity itself. So that's what you see. This has been discussed in the working group, I think couple of meetings ago, which was about domain diversity, not domain diversity, just diversity, different objective functions in case when as we know that we already had SPEC, which was clearly saying what diversity we need, but when we want to maximize the diversity and put it as an objective functions, those are the things that these three objective functions do. In the agenda, we also have a new draft which helps how to relax some of the constraints. So that requirement actually came from this document, and instead of solving this as a part of this document, we have put it as a generic idea. And this discussion happened on the mailing list as well, where this idea got generated. So now we have removed that information from this draft, and anyway, we will discuss how to relax constraints further down in the agenda. Stefan will take care of that. We also clarified the relationship to SPEC. Now, this is the right document to really talk about it, because that's where we are talking about diversity. So in the base document, we just put a reference that the further discussion about SPEC is happening in this document. And here we clarified when SPEC would be used and when association would be used. And what if both exist, then how the PC should behave. That is, PC should try to find paths meeting both the constraints, both what is being said by the SPEC, which identifies the request coming in this path computation request message, as well as any other LSPs which are part of the association group. So both are handled here. So this is the update for the diversity draft. Now let's talk about the policy. So again, a small change. We discussed this in the last time when we presented that this was one of the pending items for us to add a policy parameters TLV, because when we allow policy usually comes with some parameters that needs to be considered when we are applying the policy. So we added this opaque container within the PCEP protocol to carry this information, and the order, the meaning, the format, all of this is not part of the protocol. It needs to be set on the two participating PCEP peer out of band, in the same way how policy is set out of band. We just carry a policy ID, basically in form of an association group ID. But what does that policy means is not carried inside the PCEP protocol. Similarly, what are the parameters that are used for this policy is not carried within the PCEP protocol. We just give an opaque container to easily carry this information. But we need to make sure that there are appropriate error handling cases since we are allowing it to be carried in our protocol. So those are the things that we have done in this document. So that's the only update with policy. Now I'll move to the changes in the non-working group document, and let's start with path protection. This was discussed in the last meeting. What is this draft? It's basically create an association between working and protection LSP. In fact, this was one of the first association type that was clearly described, and this in fact gave the idea that maybe we should have a generic association object rather than coming up with a mechanism for each different type of association. So this has in fact the same timeline as the base association. The recent changes, we talk about how the disjoint association, which talks about how you do diversity, what is the diversity requirement between the protection and the working LSP. So that needs to be carried in a disjoint association. And this is about marking which is a working LSP and which is a protection LSP. So this needs to work well with both the association types. So that has been clarified, and basically other editorial changes to link it with what are the recent changes that we did in the association group document. So that's why we made this update. So basically, we feel that this ID is quite stable, it's needed, it's implemented, and it's ready for adoption. And in fact, hopefully to move along with the rest of the already adopted association documents. I think we can talk about it at the next step. I'll move on with the other association drafts. So this is just a listing of some of the other association drafts and what is their status. So the first one was in the ACTN context, try to link bunch of LSPs that belong to the same virtual network, and it has a VN association which also identify for which VN this LSPs were created, and some of this information is captured in our ACTN applicability document, etc. as well. So this document is about that. No major change, only alignment with the rest of the changes that has happened. Then we have some of the documents that I'm not involved, but I'm just listing them with the help of the authors so that it's the working group is aware of where they are. That one is bidirectional, which Rakesh presented in the last meetings, and it's pretty stable, no big change. It's already aligned to the association draft and the changes that we have done in the past. We have resource sharing that Amian presented last time. He made an update, tried to clarify the relationship between when an IRO XRO is used and when you would use resource sharing. Also, of course, the sharing and disjointness is two different things. So it's also clarified that part clearly, that when is this association used versus the resource sharing one. Apart from that, we also have some other association documents. One talks about explicit make before break. This has not been discussed since long. It was earlier published without association. So authors, once the association draft has been updated, instead of defining new TLVs and new mechanisms, they adopted to the association group. So they are already on the right track. Then we had ECMP and multi-layer, and those have not been updated since the last time. So this is just a list of everything that's been happening within the association space in PC working group. So next step, I think association group base draft is anyway on the right track. It's anyway moving. Hopefully we will see it published soon. We have working group IDs. There have been changes, as I just mentioned in the recent one. So we would really appreciate more reviews, as well as start the process of moving them towards working group last call once our association based draft gets ready. Then within the other documents, we would really want to see the protection association getting adopted. I think there is enough support for that. It's just a matter of getting it done. And then we decide the order of importance of what's being implemented versus what's being useful, etc. for the rest of the documents that we see, and decide the order in which we want to progress this. So that's just a suggestion from my side, and off to chairs and the working group.
Thanks, Dhruv. Let's stay on this slide. So update from me. I think the association group draft, having passed last call, needs shepherding. So I think I'm in rotation next to do the shepherding. I'll look at that. It's ready to. I agree. It's ready to move on. Once we get that moved, then we look at the last call for the other working group IDs, as you say. So I don't see anything blocking those. Obviously, more reviews are always good. The more reviews, the better. The easier it is to shepherd a draft if you can point to reviews and say, actually, people have looked at this, rather than, it's just been written and shipped. Adoption, I think I have to apologize for the Protection Association draft. That's somehow fallen down the cracks since the last meeting, but we should have pulled that for adoption already. I think we agreed to do that. So I'll do that as soon as possible after this meeting. And then, yes, as you say, for the others, I think there's a process of working out the order. I think actually the question has already been asked for at least 2 of these on the page in terms of what interest there is. I think we saw decent interest in the BIER and the resource sharing. I don't remember asking the question about VN association. I'm not sure if now is the right time to do that, but because this isn't really a I think we actually have plenty of things in the queue already. But yeah, I'm happy to discuss with you and the other authors what the right order for asking these questions would be. If there's any dependencies between these drafts, it would be good to know that. Otherwise, I think I take them in the order they arrive. Does that sound like
Sounds perfect.
acceptable? Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Drew, comments on any of these drafts, observations about this work in general? I mean, I think this is generally a key piece of protocol for PCEP. You know, the concept of associating paths was fairly loosely defined, and this really formalizes that. And as soon as we formalize that, we find we actually have loads of different applications for it, and so we have loads of different drafts making use of it. That just underlines the importance of getting that base association group draft absolutely bang on, because we have a lot of work coming on top of it, which relies on it. We don't really need to publish that and then find, actually, we need to do a change to it, you know, in a year's time. That would be pretty painful to do. So let's try and put the working group's focus as much as possible, please, on that association group draft, getting it through to RFC. We'll get the Shepherd review done. And once that's done, then hopefully we'll block everything else. All right. Thank you. So you are the next one too, aren't you? Okay.
So I'll be talking about stateful H-PCE. So just a quick recap. This is basically a marriage between H-PCE framework, which was been there, and the stateful PCE, basically a hierarchy of stateful PCE. So you have a parent PCE and child PCE who are both stateful. Then what will be the interaction between them, how the message exchange that already exists between PCC and PCE works seamlessly between child PCE and parent PCE. So this is basically an informational document. We don't have any extensions here. We just kind of note down clearly how these interactions are happening, how the report message, the update message, initiate message that already exists works between parent stateful PCE as well as the child PCE. And we also talk about end-to-end LSPs, because anyway, that has always been the key. But in the context of ACTN, the per domain LSP and setting up of LSPs in each domain and somehow linking them and stitching them to form end-to-end LSP, that's also been described in this document. The actual stitching, there are other documents which describes how to do that, some of which were discussed in the past in the working group as well. So that's a quick recap. What did we do in all this time? Basically, this work was adopted after Chicago. Since then, we have made sure that the document is well aligned as our other RFCs got published, and whatever the changes that were made there during publications are reflected here. We clarified the scope because and clearly said that we support both end-to-end LSP as well as per domain LSP, and whether we are setting up end-to-end RSVP-TE thing or whether we are doing per domain, this framework works for both. We also added details regarding how to use the existing path key mechanism to make sure that the confidentiality is taken care, as which is already there in other messages like request reply, but what role they play in the report, initiate, and update message as well. And the idea being that whether we have ERO, how we can hide them using the path key object. So that's been described as a consideration in the document, because that's something we need to worry about since in the context of inter-domain things. So basically the documents has been stable. There are implementations. This had been shown in the past in hackathon and bits and bytes events as well. So basically this document is quite ready to progress as well. But we also have this document, which is our basic stateless H-PCE. So until we kind of publish this, moving directly to stateful H-PCE would not make sense. So we need to work this document as well. I'm not an author of this document, but we kind of worked with the authors to make the changes, and so that both of them can be progressed quickly. So basically, what is this document? Based on our RFC 6805, which describes the H-PCE framework, this document provides some extensions, describes what changes needs to be made to PCEP, focusing on the request and reply messages in scope for H-PCE. If just a reminder that there was a discussion on the mailing list and a request made that this work, though it was experimental in the past, we moved it to standards track after confirmation on the mailing list, so which is very well appreciated. And there was one pending item, which was the domain diversity thing, which was there in an other individual draft. So we kind of clubbed this into the H-PCE context because that's where it's useful. So a new flag in SVEC, which kind of marks that apart from node, link, and SRLG, we also are looking for domain diversity, and similarly an OF code that maximize the domain diversity. So those are this is the only big technical change in this update. Apart from that, the content has been remained the same. But since this document has not been discussed, just wanted to give a quick recap. What are the basic extensions that this document actually talks about? Unique capability advertisements, talking about who's parent, who's child, what role they are playing. That's during the PCEP open message exchanges. We have extension which carries which domain a particular child PCE is serving in form of a domain ID TLV carried in an open message. That's the one that you are seeing here. Then a flag in an RP object that says that this request is H-PCE request. If you may remember, there are similar flags for VSPT used in BIER-TE. So this is used for H-PCE. So a new flag for that. The OF codes and SVEC flags is the changes that I just talked about. There were some OF codes which were already existing, so we just added one new. But there are other OF codes which were already defined. There were metric types which were defined in this document. Errors and no paths. So new error codes and no path conditions, that why path was not formed. Some new code points for that. And it has an implementation status. And so this document has been there within the working group for a while. I think it's stable here as well. Implementation exists. And I think as it was already pointed out in the chair status that this document should be moved. So if you have not looked at this document in a while, please do that. And hopefully these two documents can be moved together. And they are the basis of a lot of other work within the working group as well. So that's about it from my side. So maybe we can.
Thanks, Drew. It's good to see that the base H-PCE extensions is revived, and that some work has been done to fix the pending action item in that draft. Now I see it's revived. I think it was already in the queue for last call. We were just waiting for a live draft. Now we've got one, so we can last call that. You're absolutely right that we can't really move to last call the stateful version until we've got through there. I won't suggest we merge the drafts at this point. I think we should keep the way they are. But let's do them in that order. I want to make sure we flush out any comments or concerns from the IESG on the base H-PCE draft before we try and do anything with the stateful version. Yeah? All right. Any comments or questions from the room? You're very quiet today. All right. Thank you, Drew.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oops.
This is Young again. Sorry that I appear too often. This is the applicability of PCE for ACTN. Basically, this is kind of ACTN architecture, reference architecture. You know, some of you have seen many times. I'd like to just highlight that in TEA's working group, ACTN requirement and framework and info model, now all of them have passed the working group last call and now is in the publication request stage. So that's basically ACTN and PCEP, how they are similar. In ACTN, MDSC PNC relationship is equivalent to parent PCE and child PCE, and hierarchy of controllers basically addressed by H-PCE, and tunnel instantiation by controllers is actually PC initiated message by PCE, and MDSC multi-domain coordination stateful H-PCE. So we have quite resemblance. It may not be the same, but definitely PCE can be applicable for implementing ACTN. ACTN has another applicability, which is young models, which has advanced quite a bit at this moment. But likewise, I think PCEP can be applicable to ACTN without changing anything here, actually. So this is basically stateful H-PCE is hierarchical PCEs with the parent PCE aware of LSPs end-to-end and domain level. And as Dhruv said, pro-domain stitched LSP, the solution is actually available already. So if we want to build topology at MDSC or a parent PCE, there's LS report message that can carry that information from bottom up to be able, for the parent PCE, be able to construct the topology. And the VN instantiation is actually what a parent PCE can use PC initiate message to instantiate a multi-domain LSPs. And pro-domain report also can be facilitated by PC report message. And VN modify, PC update message can do update any changes on the LSPs. And VN delete, likewise, PC initiate message can do the same thing. So basically the point is that this document is useful to understand how PCE architecture and PCEP extensions come together to implement ACTN. And ACTN framework is now in RFC request stage. So I don't think we have much dependency on other document because this is just informational to describe how PCEP can be applied, and all those components of PCEP is in place already. So we'd like to ask if this working group, this document can move to next stage.
Thanks, Sean. And I'm just interested, who here has read the ACTN applicability draft? Okay, that's a reasonable spread of people. I guess there were about 10. So Young, I note that the document is stabilized. You've been working on it for a while, so it's good to see that. I think that we can put it in the queue for last call. We can talk about we can talk about where it goes in the queue. I think that there are a few things maybe coming first, but we definitely see that this is probably ready to go forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. By the way, if anyone is interested in shepherding this draft, then by all means tell me afterwards. I'll be grateful for the help on that. Stefan?
So I'm Stefan from Orange. So Drew already introduced this document when talking about the association diversity. When we were working on this association diversity draft, we had the requirement of being able to relax the diversity constraints in case there is no possibility to find some disjoint paths and when the customer absolutely wants to have a path. So we came with a solution after some discussion on the mailing list. This is a solution that is quite generic, so it can work with the association object or whatever constraints that we have in PCEP. So, yeah, the idea is to reuse a mechanism which already exists in the stateless PCE implementation, so the RFC 5440, which is based on the P and I flag. So we have the P flag, which can tell that a particular object is optional or not. And we have the I flag, which is able to tell that a particular object has been ignored during the path computation. In the stateful PC RFC, we currently say that these flags are unused, so they must be set to 0 and ignored on recept. So we don't have this ability to have optional objects today. So the idea is to reintroduce those flags in the context of the stateful PCE. So one example, so we have the one with the diversity when we want to relax a particular association object. So we can set the P flag or unset the P flag to say that it is optional, and we set it to say that it is mandatory. We can also do it, for example, for other objects like the metric object. If we want to, for example, compute a path which is based on the delay metric, we can also want to relax these constraints if we are not able to find a path without the boundary that are set in the object. So the extension, in order to be able to reintroduce those flags in the stateful PC, we are proposing to introduce a new capability, just to ensure that we are backward compatible with the existing stateful PC RFC. So the idea is to have a capability. We'll tell more about this later. And then we are defining how we are handling the PNI flags in the different messages. So what is this capability? So we are just adding a new bit in the stateful PC capability TLV, which we can call the relax bit. And if both ends are setting the relax bit, we can use the new procedures to get the benefit of the PNI flags. And if someone is not setting the relax bit, we are falling back to the existing procedures, which are to ignore the PNI flags. So in terms of processing rule, it's quite simple. So regarding the P flag, in the PC report, we can use it to tell the PC that a particular object is optional or mandatory in the path computation. And when using it in the PC update and the PC initiate message, we can modify or tell the PCC that a particular object must be used during the path setup. The ignore flag, it's a bit similar. So when, for example, a PCC is setting an object as optional using the P flag, the PC can reply with a PC update with a flag with a particular path that has been computed, telling with the I flag that this particular object has been taken into account or if it has been ignored. So we know, the PCC will know if a particular object has been used in the path computation or not. In the PC report, we can also use the I flag to tell to the PC that a particular object has been used or not during a path setup. And for the PC initiate message, it does not have any usage. It does not have any good meaning. So it's not used. So by reintroducing the PNI flag for the stateful PC, we are also able to handle unknown objects. So today, if an object is not supported by the PC, we may have a PC error that will be sent. Now we can tell that a particular object is optional, so we can compute a path without taking this object into account. So this is our proposal to be able to relax some constraints in the case of stateful PC. So the question is it the right approach to use? Is it also a good problem to solve? Based on the discussions that were on the mailing list, it seems that this was a problem that needs to be solved, but then is it the right approach to use?
Adrian Farrell, it's absolutely a problem to solve, yes. What you have is a solution, and
is what, sorry?
A solution. And what's running through my head is whether you end up needing to trade options in a much more flexible and therefore horrible way. You can rank them, you can give each option a Boolean, but then you start to say, well, these two go against this one, and this one's slightly higher priority at this percentage, and
I agree.
But you can see that on a GUI.
But don't you have already the same issue with the stateless PC?
Yes.
Yeah.
It just gets worse. So yeah, I think it would be a perfectly reasonable starting point for the working group, but we might need to play with it.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Are we done?
Sounds like it. Yeah, I agree with you and Adrian. This is a problem we need to solve. I personally think that this approach is fine for me. I agree that in time there may need to be more flexibility, but for now I don't see an immediate need for that. So, just speaking as not as the chair, obviously, but just as an individual, it seems like the right direction to take this. Can I ask a question, actually, the relationship between this and the previous relaxed constraints draft that I think you presented maybe a couple of times ago?
Maybe this was not my draft, because I don't remember it. We came with a solution in the association diversity draft, which was to create, if I remember correctly, a TLV with the objects that have been ignored.
Yeah.
But this was not really, for us, this was not a good track.
Okay, right. I think that's what I was thinking of.
Because here we can reuse something that is already existing.
Yeah.
We are just reviving those flags.
Okay, yeah. Well, I think we keep it simple. That's the best thing from my point of view. Okay, thank you, Stefan. The next presenter is Xiong Kan.
Hello everyone, I'm Quan Xiong from ZTE. My presentation is about the PCE extensions for SRTP networks. The SRTP networks the reason for the requirement is that the in Spring working group, the Fang Wei Hu has described the draft about the Spring segment routing. The draft name is Spring SRTP use cases. This describes the use case of segment routing tuner to be deployed in NPR's transport profile. So we the SR defined SRTP networks. It means the segment routing technology in NPL's TP network. Based on the SRTP use cases, my document defines a general mechanism to create the bidirectional SR tuner in SRTP networks with the PCE, and we propose a set of extensions to PCEP for SRTP networks. Let us look at the SRTP scenario with the PCE. The figures show that the PCE can calculate the end-to-end SR passes and assign the ordered segment list and elicit SR pass on a PCC. The PCC is a SR load. Just as everyone knows, the PCEP has the SR segment routing extensions with the PCEP protocol, but the SR network is different with the SRTP. The most important difference is the SRTP is from the MPRTP, and it is required to create a bidirectional LSP. So we define the two scenario use case with the PCE. The first one is the co-routed bidirectional SRTP LSP. As the figure shows, the PCE will elicit the bidirectional SRTP LSP from with the PCE elicit message. We can see the PCE will send PCE elicit message to the ingress and the egress separately, and to elicit SRTP LSP. In the SR network, in the SRTP network, from A to E, it is the forward direction, and the PCE may assign a SID list like from A to B to C to D to E, and the SID list is the B, C, D, E is the forward direction, and the reverse direction is from the same path but is the reverse, and is the E to D to C to B to A, and the SID list is the D, C, B, A. But the two directional LSP, we need a path label to band the two directional paths, and the solution was defined in Spring working group. It is called the path segment. This is the called routed bidirectional SRTP progress. Let us look at the associated bidirectional SRTP LSP. The figure is similar with the before the last one, but it is different. The forward direction is the same, but the reverse direction path is different with the forward direction. Let the figure show the forward direction. The SID list is the B, CDE, and the reverse direction is F to G, H, A. And we also need a path label to bound the two direction, but the difference is that the two direction FP can be created from different PCP message. In this scenario, the FPs can be issued by PCC or can be issued by PCE. The two directional SRTP FPs may be associated by association object as defined in the PCE association BIER, the draft. These two scenarios are the use case with the PCE in SRTP networks. So the PCEP extensions is lead for the bidirectional. The first one is the bidirectional XP, and the extension has been presented by Yang Li just now. The B flags of the SRP object lead to defined to indicate a bidirectional SP operation in the co-routed bidirectional SP. So the last one, we define a SRTP ERO extension. As we know, segment routing extension has been defined in segment routing PCEP extension, the draft. But we define another bidirectional turner because the SR extension is just in the unidirectional scenario. So for bidirectional turner, we need to define the bidirectional turner information in the SR ERO. So we extend the SR ERO to let the figure show the ST. We extend the SID type and add a SID type to indicate the type of information associated with the path label. And we add R bit. The R bit is reverse flag, indicates the SR path direction. If the when the R is set, it means the path label is the reverse direction. So this is what the scenarios with PCE and the extensions with the PCEP. And the last step, we will do more research about the SRTP use case and more extensions for SRTP LSP. So comments and discussion is welcome.
Hi, it's Adrian Farrell. I think you've got something here, okay? But you have got something good here. But I'm getting confused by what SRTP actually is.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether you need that name at all. I think you just have SR LSPs.
Yeah, right. The SRTP is a new network we defined, just means the segment routing technology in MPLS TP networks. So we call SRTP for short.
Yeah, so I understand that, but then I'm going to have to step back and say, well, what is MPLS TP?
Yeah.
I think what you're after is central control.
Yeah.
Yeah, central controls.
Yeah.
Management programming.
Yeah.
And that is essentially what the PCE approach to programming the head ends of SR LSPs is all about. So, yeah, I understand the marketing reason for calling it SRTP, but let's try to not confuse ourselves here with what we're doing. And then I want to ask, in the general case, does the tunnel in both directions have to be identical technology? So your use case, you have SR one way, SR back again.
Yeah.
Colby's draft has got MPLS swapping one way and MPLS swapping the other way. Now, could we have an MPLS environment where we go SR one way and come back on a conventional LSP? I think we might, although I don't know what the use case is. So in doing this work, it might be nice just to always have in your head, let's just point at another tunnel and not worry about what type of tunnel it is.
Okay, thank you.
I kind of agree with what Adrian was saying, and the idea being we already have the bidirectional association. You have SR-ERO. Even the extensions that are proposed here, it's not really clear what's the benefit of it, and isn't this already possible by what we already have? If we have an SR-ERO which carries the path, and you can associate it in bidirectional way, carrying this path label as a new SR-ERO subobject, that value is not clear to me. But if you have the use case, maybe you can explain why this is needed, why a new path label thing is needed, and wouldn't the association itself can correlate the two directions?
Himanshu from Siena. So I have a comment on Adrian's TP usage. I think that MPLS TP is well understood. Mostly means not co-routed, but bidirectional. You need to educate yourself, I think. But what Dhruv also said is that, do we really have to? Do you really need something here additional, or it can be possible with whatever we have? If you are going to configure on both ends, the forward and the reverse LSP, what additional thing you need, right? Do both ends know that this is a bidirectional LSP, and if one goes down, the other goes down, and all that stuff? The OAM and all that goes with the transport profile, right? So I don't know, but I think that's.
I think the requirement mainly from the draft stream MPLS path segment, because the segment routing has it is the unidirection, and in MPLS TP we lead SR the bidirectional SR. So the SR is the unidirectional, and under the SID list is the one direction, but we need to bound the two direction, and the draft define a path label to bound the direction. So the path label is required in the segment routing network. It is not required in PCF, but we need to assign it and send to the SR load. So we extend the path label and define the new mechanism. So any questions?
So path label, that's the key thing that this. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
A comment. One thing from recent search, and I have just read the. Please turn to the page two. Okay, page two. The document will introduce to statement the SRTP problem, and I found that draft that document, you just introduce a network architecture using a controller, not a path computation element, and your computation path computation element and the PCE and the TCC cooperation here maybe introduce a lot of difficulties when implementation to the real network. What do you think about this? And so what's the difference between your controller implement this architecture or PCE enabled architecture? What's the difference? And what are the advantages and disadvantages? Thank you.
Stuart Bryan, mostly when you, I don't know what your application to this is, but mostly when you're running MPLS-TP, you're running pseudowire over MPLS-T to carry Ethernet or something like that, in which case the pseudowire label gives you a perfectly fine way of binding the two halves together.
Sorry, I'm not very clear with your question.
Why you need a path label, why you need an additional path label. We can talk offline if you prefer.
Sorry.
I think what people are wondering about mostly here is why the requirement for the additional path label, and why do we need to add that when we already have the SRERO telling us the path end to end, and it's I have to say it's not quite clear to me either. It would be a good idea if a draft kind of explained that specific point about why that is needed. And
it's clearly needed. You clearly need something to know, because you've lost all your labels by the time this thing has got to the destination. Because this is SR, right? So normally you could tell from the LSP label what the LSP was, or from the pseudowire label, if it's there, what the context was. If they're just doing it with SR, they've lost that. So they do need something. But quite a lot of the time, the pseudo-wire label would be all that.
I was going to say that usually that would be the payload of whatever goes over the LSP. So the pseudo-wire label or the L3 VPN label.
Well, you don't normally run VPNs over TP. Well, maybe TP's changed since I worked on it. But.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the comments, and any more detailed discussion will be welcome offline. Thank you.
Okay.
So has Daniele arrived yet? No. He has. I was just going to boot you from the agenda.
You were hoping for.
You'll need this.
Hello, everyone. This is an update of a draft that we presented a couple of IETF meetings ago with a good content but wrong message. So we decided to fine-tune a little bit. Let's start with a recap, since you've not heard about it for a while. RSC 5541 define an objective function that is really useful, which is maximum residual bandwidth for paths. It is very useful because it allows to compute paths maximizing the minimum value of the residual bandwidth and returning the path with the largest bottleneck. But what's the problem? This is an objective function, not a T metric, so the value cannot be returned. In addition to that, it only deals with the physically available bandwidth, and it doesn't take into account priorities. So, all in all, it's not possible to put constraints on the bottleneck of the path. Proposal. The proposal is to define two new metrics to be used in PCEP.
path and reserved bandwidth at a given priority, so adding priority to the reservable bandwidth, not the physical one, and the path residual bandwidth, which will be returned as a result of the path computation. The first one is the minimum value of the reserved bandwidth at a given priority among all the links along the path. You will need to read this 2 or 3 times to understand what it means. The second one is the minimum value of the free physical bandwidth among all the links in the path. So why defining these two new things? First of all, because T matrix can be returned as a result of the path computation, and hence can be used to know how much traffic can be still routed over that path that was just computed. And in addition to that, it allows optimizing a path against a reserved or residual bandwidth. And last but not least, trying to prevent bottlenecks in the network. So, changes between the first version and this one. As I said, the focus was moved. This was presented as something that was sort of mandatory in hierarchical PCE scenarios and so on. The goal is now not to mandate this anymore. In fact, this is defined as an applicability scenario, as a use case where potentially these extensions can be used. Again, the focus is moved from hierarchical path computation to the definition of new metrics. And in particular, 2 sections have been updated. We added a section called the mode of operations, which describes how these metrics are used within the metric object. And procedures are defined as well. Well, the only meaningful thing that the section says is no changes to procedures. And use cases, a new section on use cases is described with applicability to ACTN and hierarchical path computation. Changes to the protocol. This is very long and boring. I put the slide there for who is curious to see how these metrics are defined and used. While I would like to spend a few seconds on encoding. This is very, very simple. It's 2 metric types are defined and added to the metric object. They are expressed in bytes per second and actually defined for PSC technologies. So in case this is something that is useful and there is the willingness to extend this to layer 0, layer 1, lambda, TDM, whatever, it's very simple to extend it. The priority is not encoded in the object, but it's inherited from the LSPA object. Summary and next steps. So with the new modification, it is something very simple and no dependencies at all on any other object or extensions. It can be used to know how much traffic can be still routed on a path that has just been computed, and else it's helpful to prevent network bottlenecks. Is there any interest in the working group to work on this? Oops, this was your question, not mine.
Thanks, Daniele. Who has, by show of hands, who's read the latest version of this draft, the new one that Daniele just presented? Yeah, okay. So there's a half dozen people read it. Who is interested in working on this problem in PCE? Okay, 4 or 5, 4.5, I guess. Okay, so I'm happier with the new presentation of the requirement. I think it makes more sense to me as a reader I think there's some mild, it looks like mild interest, but interest is there to work on this. I guess I'd be interested to confirm that on the list and see whether there is interest in taking this further forward. But yeah, I think the technical requirement makes more sense now. I think it's clearer. So thank you for respinning that for us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Danielle. How's your mic?
Hello, everyone. So this is the second trying to give the present for our consideration the PCE extension for native IP network. So here I just give a quick look back for the background of the PCE extension. So we have give the scenario and the solution for the traffic engineer in native IP network. This draft has been adopted as the TWG document. So currently we have think without the help of the PCE controller, it is not easy to meet the goal of the end-to-end QoS assurance in our network. So we propose the following solution. First is the deployment of the SDN controller PCE in our network, native IP network. The second is the PCE SDN controller will responsible for the complex path calculation algorithm. And after its calculation, it will send out the result to the router. So we just send two key information. The first is will popular traffic prefix via the different BGP session, and the second is we will use the PCE or SDN controller to manipulate the path to the BGP next hop of the prefix. So here is the proposal for the PCP extension. We want to use the PCP to do the following three works. First is the built-in different BGP session dynamically and rapidly. The second is the popular different prefix between them. So we will populate some, for example, use one BGP session to populate the normal traffic prefix, and use another BGP session to transfer the different traffic prefix. The third is we will manipulate the path to the BGP next hop to the on demand based on our network's real situation. So based on the requirement, there are three objects need to be transferred. Here I list the three new defined PCP object. Belong to the different PCP object, we also think how to transfer these objects. There are two approaches. One approach is similar with the LSP initial similar with the PC initial LSP. So we will pick back this object within LSP initial request message. The second is we define one new CCDR related T request message. If we select the approach one to finish this work, the process will be very similar with the procedure defined in RFC 8281. So if we select the approach 2, we must define the new procedure, but it is also similar with the procedure defined in this RFC. And approach 1 will reuse the I flags for the capability negotiation. and the approach 2 will define some new flag for the capability negotiation. So considering the implementation for this object, we think that if we use the approach 1, then we focus on mainly the newly defined object. We did not consider the procedure. But if we define select the approach 2, we will define the new concept and new procedure. But maybe more distinguished with controller PCE needs the LSP. Currently, we are preferred to select the approach 1, and I think this selection can be discussed later with the device vendor for the implementation. So here I just want to have it enough to adopt as WGL draft, and if so, and which approach to transfer newly defined object is better, so we can discuss the online or offline. Thank you.
Okay, so first of all, if anyone has any comments, then please go to the mic. No. So I think this is the second time Ai-Jun has presented this. Is that right, Ai-Jun? The second time. So the first time this was presented, we had a discussion about the overall problem that was being solved here. This is effectively an application of PCE, which is a little bit outside of what it's been used for previously. This seems now to be more towards using PCE to take TE decisions in an IP-only network. So we asked about time that the work be discussed also in TEAS from an architectural standpoint. I think that TEAS has been discussing this, and I see some work adopted in TEAS now to progress that architecture. So thank you for following that instruction and taking that away to TEAS. I think that the time now is right to ask in PCE whether we want to consider taking this protocol work on. So I think I probably want to ask a few questions here of the audience. The first question is, who here is aware of this work already and is aware of the work that's being done in TEAS around this space? Who's actually been following this in TEAS? Anyone in this room? Yeah, all right, so there's maybe 10 people. So good, that gives me some confidence that people are paying attention to this problem. The next question is, who would like to see us adopt this draft into the working group and work on this problem, on solving this problem in PCE? Who would like to see this adopted? I think I see 8. I think I see 8 hands or so. So yeah, that's a good subset. And then finally, is there anyone here who would not like to see us work on this problem, who think that this is not something we should be working on?
So if you have some question, we can discuss offline. So.
Yeah, I don't see anyone raising their hands not wanting to work on this. So that's a good start. Okay, so I think the next step is that we take this to the list and we poll the working group to see if this is something we want to adopt. Okay, thank you. Where are the blue sheets, please? Can you wave if you see the blue sheets? I hope they're somewhere. Come on, they must be here somewhere. Who has the blue sheets? Oh, awesome. Thanks, Drew. So who needs to, does anyone else need to sign the blue sheets, please? So the last slot is me, and I want to give an update on what we learned from the PCEP SDN discussion. If you remember last year, around about after the summer, I started a thread on the PCE mailing list to ask about basically the overall scope of the working group. The context of this was that increasingly in PCE, people are bringing more work into the working group, which take PCE away as a protocol away from its original purpose of sort of client-server, ask for a path, get a response, and more towards a full-blown controller protocol. And there was a sense to which I was worrying about mission creep here, and I wanted to get some sort of confirmation and explicit discussion about that this is the direction that we are consciously going in, and how far do we go. So I want to share what I've learned, and then I want to sort of take stock of where that leaves the various proposals that people have brought to the working group. So I think what we learned from, and thank you everyone who engaged in that. I had a real good feeling from the responses that I got back. People really engaged with the question. I think we did manage to conclude several things, although it was a fairly long and open-ended discussion. We did conclude that fairly obviously using PCEP for SDN-like function is reasonable, is happening, and has actually already happened. I think we can't say that this is outside the scope of a working group when actually for years we've been working on this. So it was a fairly obvious conclusion we were going to come to, but anyway, at least we explicitly made it that is what we should be doing. In terms of what people's goals are for this type of extensions of the protocol, the goals really, I think, that I heard were to offer an alternative to other southbound protocols in the network, like an alternative for a controller to program network elements versus netcom for OpenFlow. In some environments, PCEP is a way that people want to do that, and that's what's really being motivating these extensions. What it's not trying to do is replace anyone's control plane. There's no sense in which we're saying throw away the control plane and just use PCE. What we're really saying is here's an alternative to the SPI protocols. So I think those things became clearer as the discussion went on. What is happening? Well, both before, during, and after that discussion, some SDN features have already been adopted, published even. So the stateful PCE is clearly the thing which started all this. That's now an RFC. PCE-initiated LSPs is also now an RFC. We have drafts in various stages. The LSP control request draft, which we adopted into the working group one IETF ago, PCE flow spec, which we've only just adopted into the working group, the PCE CC work going on in T's. So this is all going ahead. So we are actually making good headway on this. There was disagreement, quite a lot of disagreement on the scope of how far we take the SDN features. And there, obviously, the main bone of contention was PCEP LS and whether that is something that is good for the working group or not. There were several passionate arguments on either side, but I think that the situation for that remains unclear. So I think we have to tackle that head on, really, is the next step for this discussion. What about PCEP-LS? So I think we need to clarify the situation, and I think we need to put it to bed once for all either way. We need to take a decision about this. We've heard a lot of arguments. I think that one possible way forward would be, let's just poll for adoption and see if people support it. But I'm pretty certain that if I did that, then we just hear the same arguments that I already heard, and I would still be just as confused about whether there is consensus or not. I don't think that would represent progress. I do think we need to finish the debate on those open points about PCEP-LS. It seems to me that there's a disconnect, that there's the proponents saying, you know, we need this, there's operational requirement, we absolutely have to have it, and then the people against it are saying just the opposite. Actually, there is no requirement, we don't need it. So I want us to finish that debate, and I want to understand personally where the disconnect is coming in. I want to put some new energy into that as of this meeting. I think it kind of got left on the mailing list and never really closed down. I'm going to summarize what I think the key objections to adopting PCEP-LS were on the next slide. I'm also going to send a summary of the whole discussion that we had to the mailing list, because clearly the discussion has to happen on the list, although I'm also happy for the discussion to happen right now, as long as we have time to have it. So I think why PCEP-LS hasn't progressed further than it has, I think these are the three main things which have been raised against it. There are some significant doubts raised over the technical requirement. People point out there are at least three other ways of getting linked state to a controller. IGP, BGP-LS, netconf, we know this. I don't think there's yet been a convincing demonstration that there's a real operational context in which none of those methods can be used, and that PCE has to be used instead. And I think that that's really the main thing where there's still disconnect. The second concern is whether we actually need a multi-vendor solution here. Is there actually an interoperability requirement that we need to standardize for? Is there effectively more than one vendor that needs to have this technology put out there? There were many people responding to the thread. It wasn't very clear to me which arguments were academic and who actually has product they want to ship. But I think that this is actually a relevant question to be asking. We do have an RFC now for experimental code points. Does that solve the problem? I think that's a question we should ask as well. And then finally, kind of on a more technical side, I think Jeff Tansoura raised, although I don't see him here today, that we haven't really demonstrated PCE has the right scalability properties for this type of application. His concern was BGP-LS is built on BGP, which is shown to scale to large volumes of data. Is PCE the right vehicle for that type of data also? We had a similar discussion about the auto bandwidth adjustments, sort of on the fly monitoring of bandwidth changes, were concerns from JP back in several IETFs ago now about whether PCE is really scalable. I think that's also something that we should at least have a think about, because it seems like it's something we would want to be sure that this is the right protocol to use. So, for whatever time we have left, I am interested in feedback now and then feedback on the list. Is that a fair summary of where we've got to? Or not? If not, please come and give me feedback. Can we progress this debate now? Can we progress it on the list? Is there more information that we can share in order to make progress on this disconnect that people have? That's the end of my status, but please give me some feedback.
somebody has to talk, so it might as well be me. It's Adrian Farrell. I find this really hard, okay, because I can see the reasons for and against. I was an author on BGP-LS, and at the time was not completely convinced that it was the right approach. Have you talked to anyone in the operations community about this? Like, for example, an AD?
I have not, and that is probably a good idea, isn't it? I mean, obviously we've had input from operators, but people from the ops area would probably be wise people to ask.
I'm not sure that they can actually answer the question, but they may be able to say, well, if you're building an operational protocol for sucking loads of gloop out the network, these are things to think about. Maybe.
Okay, thanks. I'm glad for the input. Thank you very much. And anything that helps us move this forward is this debate forward is a good thing.
Robin from Huawei. So I think that's regarding the summary. I have some comments. Can go to that. So the first one, I to some extent I don't agree that there's multiple choice with regard the BGP PCEP link states, because the first the IGP, to some extent, if we want to use the IGP, maybe the controller and the device, there's multi-hop. If we want to use the IGP, we have to set up a tunnel to direct connect the controller and the device.
Yeah,
so
I think that the reasons why IGP might not be suitable are fairly well understood by now, and I think it would be good to have the same level of understanding of the other two. Why not BGP-LS? Why not Netcom?
Okay. Okay. The second is the Netconf. I think the Netconf, I don't think is the performance is not good enough to satisfy the requirement. Compare it with the BGP link state, IGP, and the PCEP link state. So I think with regard to this one, I think only the candidate with regard to the PCEP link state is just the BGP link state. That's my point. Okay. And the second is for the multi-vendor. My question, I think, is yes, because I think the controller and maybe the third parties, the device is also the different vendors. So, and also maybe I think definitely in our experience, based on our experience, there's not all the scenarios the operators use the BGP. To some extent, they are scared of a BGP. That's my point.
Yeah, I think, oh, by the way, stepping out of this for a moment, as chair, I think I have to cut the mic after Hao-Mian, so, because we're basically out of time here. But, yeah, I've heard that operators are scared of BGP, and I know BGP is scary, but BGP-LS is not quite the full BGP stack. I think to ship state from a device up to a controller on BGP-LS doesn't mean that you need to have a full-blown BGP policy engine. It doesn't mean that you have to have a complicated mesh of BGP nodes configured and monitored in your network. It's kind of simpler than that. You can actually do it with a fairly small module of code, because all you're really doing is shipping data up to a server. But I understand that saying BGP to an operator can provoke a reaction that you did not intend. Yeah. Okay. Hao-Mian, if you keep it to a minute, please, because we're over time.
I will be quick. Hao-Mian from Huawei. Thank you for summarizing the recap the discussion on the list. I think it covers most of the technical points. But to me, actually, I understand that there are some similar approaches to do the same thing, but I'm wondering whether the number of other ways would be affecting whether we need this technical or not. Personally, I think people all agree that there is a functionality required for path computation, and we use the PCE to do this. But actually, the RS, when we collect the link state, actually is a kind of preparation on constructing the database and makes the PCE prepared to compute the path correctly. So actually, the proposal of PCE PRS is not trying to replacing any existing technologies, but we just want to give an option that we can do this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it means that PCE need to work together with other kind of protocols in the literature together to complete the whole stuff. And actually, we have another draft, the INSICAM working groups, talking about how the different protocols work with each other for different specific scenarios on, for example, topology collection and service provisioning. But I believe PCP is definitely an important piece of the whole network.
Young, how do you react OSPF and ISS working group closed at this moment? So anything that you want to add on to IGP, how do you address that? So I think that's one issue that I see. Yeah, I mean, yeah, okay. And the second point is, from optical vendor perspective, BGPLS is out of the question. And, we don't implement that. And then I'm not sure any other optical vendor implement BGPLS. And regarding IGP, I think P7LS, what it does is instead of sending to the neighbor, it just sent to the northbound. So it doesn't change much in coding. Just a much faster way if you have a lot of link and node convergence time and a lot of optical data being added. So there might be actually there's a study on that for the large scale networks. P7LS is much faster to give the network state. So I want to share that, perspective.
Okay, thanks. Himanshu, is it fast?
Yeah, just I'm neutral to this, so I don't have any opinion one way or the other. But one can argue, and I guess maybe that is what he was saying, is that if you already have a PSAP connection, right? Why need to have a passive listening on IGP or have a BGP and other thing implemented on that, right? You can suck that information right using the PSAP-LS. So that could be in favor of that.
Okay, I think we'll thank you for the feedback so far. We'll continue it on the list. As I say, we need to put renewed energy into that discussion and try to conclude it one way or the other. So thanks for the input. And that was also the last thing for the working group. So we will see you next time.